Excellent, and welcome to the TADSummit Innovators. We have our second lawyer on. I never thought we'd have so many lawyers on the Innovators podcast, but they are doing very cool stuff. So we have Johnathan Marashlian. Johnathan, welcome to the TADSummit podcast.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Johnny. Very nice to be on.
And Johnny, how are you?
I'm excited, and I've known Johnathan for many years. And Johnathan, you didn't say nothing about my shirt.
It's bold. It's busy.
No, it matches your logo and your colors. The same thing that you did yesterday. So yesterday, Johnathan had an amazing podcast with a commissioner at the FCC, Jeff Pulver, and Glenn Richards. And Alan, I don't know if you caught it, but it was just spectacular. I mean, you need a part 2, you need a part 3 on net neutrality, which is, kind of out of our way, but it's in our way and it's important. And I can't tell you, because as Rick Joyce always calls me, I'm a jailhouse lawyer. I'm the guy that thinks he's a lawyer or give legal advice. But I am responsible.
So much time with lawyers.
Well, look, I'm probably responsible for about $50 to $60 million in legal fees over the years, and I've had them all. And I'm really excited about Johnathan coming on here, and I'll tell people why. The most important person in your life, besides a good woman, is an attorney. I learned at an early age because they could really hurt you. And, so I go way back with Johnathan when he was a two-man shop in the prepaid industry, which there's no industry like the prepaid industry. There's nothing more insane. It was literally legal counterfeiting. We took a piece of paper, we took credit from carriers, and it was just run amok. We bought something for 50 cents, we sold it for 10 cents, and bankruptcies galore, and the characters involved, and there's just nothing like it. And I watched Johnathan become, go from a two-man shop to like the man. I mean, giving even the most innocent of distributors, because distributors and the carriers, it was a big pull and push. And Johnathan was always there fighting for the little guy. He was always on the side of the little guy, and what he's still doing now. So I would consider him a big law lawyer with small town values, even though he doesn't want me to call him big law. But so I go back, our friend Arnie passed away, Johnathan.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunate. He
had
a battle. He won one battle, but was not able to overcome Lou Gehrig.
Yeah. So we're talking about Arnie Goodstein, who was at NACT, which I restructured, and Jonathan's put together many documents. A lot of those companies and stuff that you were forming, I was involved in. You just didn't know over the years in the prepaid industry. But
Johnny, I call it the Wild West days of the mid 2000s, late 2000s with the prepaid industry.
I laugh at these people. I laugh at these people in the SMS industry. They have no idea. They
Speaking of prepaid international and SMS, I spent a little bit of time at the ITW last week, and that is so different than it was 10, 15 years ago. Still deals being done, but we're talking about businesses getting with the thinnest of margins, and the price of a voice call nowadays is dirt cheap. So it's interesting. There's a lot more talk about SMS and that ecosystem than there was about traditional international calling.
Yeah. Well, it's a bigger industry. I mean, our prepaid industry back in the day was roughly $2 billion at its max on the prepaid. I'm just talking on the calling card side, right?
IDT might have been $2 billion by itself, however.
Yeah, well, exactly. But that's when IDT was at its peak, and they were majority of the market. I know because I was number 2 behind IDT with Vartec until Vartec. I got caught in that $8 billion bankruptcy with every distributor in the country. I mean, we had over 400 brands back in the day. I don't know if you remember Diamond, Digitech, Star Telecom. And then Vartec decided to go bust for $8 billion. And we were just left holding $140 million worth of phone cards that we paid for. And that became my trek into bankruptcies. And then I filed, I put it into a Chapter 11, then I put it into a Chapter 7, actually met John Ledger because he came in and tried to save us when he was at Global Crossing. But yeah, it was a bankruptcy after bankruptcy. IDT was, I mean, they were the player, but before IDT, there was Sam Tawfik and PT1, and he dominated.
Yeah.
And there was nobody could touch him. And then he came back as STI, and he dominated enough to be able to sell the company. And then it shifted, and the guys that took it over from Marketel in Mexico. I don't know if you know the guys from Marketel, Gustavo.
The smart ones took the federal excise tax refunds that they got from the IRS.
Richie, my boy,
Yeah.
Richie came around. This guy was a phone card. This guy was a wireless distributor, Alan. He used to sell $400 or $500 million a year in wireless prepaid cards at 0.25% profit. That's all he made. But he went and tied up all these distributors on this federal excise tax. How many of those did you handle?
Well, we secured a multi-million-dollar refund that ended up we ended up having to litigate the IRS on behalf of Locust Telecommunications, if you recall.
Oh, so you did Locust, okay.
Yeah.
But Richie cleaned up, and a bunch of guys cleaned up on that and made millions on the excise tax. But it was a crazy time. But I think now watching you become one of the predominant lawyers in the country, I call you the best telecom lawyer since Rick Joyce retired.
Yeah.
Although he's kind of retired, he's not retired. He doesn't like foreign ownership of certain assets in our country. I don't know if you know that, Johnathan.
I'm aware. Yes, I am well aware.
You're well. He's got a problem with that. No, I think for us at TADSummit, look, we have a pretty big community. We've got over 19,000 subscribers. We've got a little bit of a different market. A lot of our people, we have guys that go into hackathons, and there's some startups, and then we have obviously the SMS, the CPaaS industry. Alan's been doing this for decades, and been a brand on its own, and we kind of blew up with our podcasts. We have a lot of guys on Wall Street, hedge funds when we were calling the markets, and then we got kind of blocked on YouTube, but now we're released. I think our podcast last night, I think we're like 1,300 views in 24 hours.
Yeah.
On it. So
podcast 69 is moving. I'm not sure
yeah,
whether it's the
again.
number or
I mean,
the
I don't
content,
know if we'll get up to the 75,000 that we did when we got Jeff Lawson fired. When we kind of explained a deal that he had with Cineverse. So just comical. But it's important. I think it's important for our community and our customers to understand the most important person in your life is your attorney. And if you get the wrong one, I've had the wrongs early on, and it's the worst thing I could ever imagine. And Johnathan Marashlian is the type of guy that'll give you the advice. He'll tell you, what you don't want to hear. He'll tell you what you want to hear, but he'll put you first. And that's the key with attorneys. And I got a couple of quick stories, but I want to get back into Johnathan because Johnathan, so your firm has grown a lot. I mean, I heard your Diane speak at a Pulver event on startups. I mean, so you're really representing the who's who in our industry without coming out and saying it. You're representing some of the most important companies in our space right now.
We have a very, very diverse and broad client base, which again, that takes me back to my very early days practicing law, working for a firm that grew very quickly during the .com era, but it collapsed very quickly once the .bomb exploded. From that experience, you learn a life lesson that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So I really made it a point from 20 plus years ago to attract clients from the very newest of new entrants, the small mom and pops, all the way up to large multinationals. Never really concentrating in any single company or segment of the very diverse telecom market, right? It's you could track my history doing tariffs for long distance companies way back when, to right now, big issues are robocall mitigation, restoring trust in the communications networks. Obviously, the new net neutrality rules are going to have quite a bit of an impact on a segment of the industry that has not had a very heavy touch regulation thus far, and that's the broadband internet service providers. So again, we're make sure we're very diversified in terms of who we serve and the types of needs we are fulfilling for those clients. But we stay true to what we are, which is the CommLaw Group, and just like the Federal Communications Bar Association is calling itself the Tech Bar, communications lawyers and companies that are serving, or firms that are serving this industry, really have to be both experts in telecom law, which is very complex, right? It's a specialty among specialties,
extremely,
as well as a bit broader business experience, the types of services and experiences you need to serve a software company and technology companies, equipment manufacturers. Again, everybody up and down the ecosystem, whether it's satellite, voice over IP, cloud communications, text messaging, SMS, and that marketplace. We do a little bit of everything for the companies we serve.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's so impressive. How many attorneys do you have in your firm now?
No, we have a dozen attorneys, and as you see, we also have our consulting affiliate. Again, the affiliate really focuses on the administration of compliance. So that's one of the things, again, early on lesson, right? It's you observe that businesses back in the 90s, as competition really started to take a hold in the telecom industry, you had a cottage industry of outsourced compliance firms, consulting firms or CPA firms that do compliance, but they don't really, none of them ever really hired lawyers, especially telecom lawyers, and there's a lack of a sensitivity that I think always existed and still exists to this day in that cottage industry of compliance firms. And I, by and large, built up a client base at our law firm on the backs of some of the failings of compliance firms. And so when we would get a client at our law firm that had lost its license or had fallen into arrears or was subject to an investigation, you help them get over that hump, and it's painful sometimes. But once they get past it, they don't want to look backwards. They don't want to go backwards. They want something better going forward. Mm-hmm. So I like to say nowadays, 90% or more of our compliance affiliates clients are also law firm clients. They either started with our law firm or they went through our law firm before they ended up having their, a better compliance profile being managed by, consultants, compliance specialists, and supported by a really good software platform that we self-developed over the course of the past 15 years. And again, all of that stuff, for the most part, is done under fixed fees, subscription-based fees, things that emulate the compliance cottage industry.
Yeah.
But they have access to lawyers. They have access to, people that can answer the more difficult questions or can look around the corner. Or again, I always put myself in the shoes of a business owner. And, one of the things that I've noticed about a lot of lawyers is they'll answer the question that's asked, and that's all they'll answer. They're not looking around the corner. They're not looking at the peripheral issues that might be implicated. That's something we don't do here, right? If you ask a question and we give an answer, but it's going to break something over here or it's going to create some risks over there, we're going to let you know that by addressing it, the issue that you brought to our attention, you might be causing some unintended consequences. And so let's weigh all of that into our consideration of a path forward. Yeah. And that's always, I find that moment of a client, realizing, maybe I don't want to do that because I wasn't aware that I was going to throw myself on the coals for some other issue that might crop up, a year or two in the future.
I think what you just said is so important to me. I mean, when I early in my career, I hated lawyers so much that I literally went and got a website called yourlawyer'saliar.com. And I almost like was going to quit everything just to go after attorneys. As you see, I'm pretty aggressive in whatever I believe in. And it's just so important. Now, just a quick story. I mean, after Rick and I beat Cineverse, Tyntec, and then I restructured Tyntec, I gave him the assets. Tyntec literally hired Mayor Brown because they wanted to hire a brand. And at the time, Rick had retired because Cineverse came back and tried to do the same thing to them. And they basically just duplicated my lawsuit, except they didn't take over the actual company that I owned. They bought the agreement. So they lost the continuity and a failure to deal. Of course, Mayor Brown didn't tell them that. And what I found out during the trial is that Mayor Brown had represented the CommLaw Group. So Mayor Brown represented the CommLaw Group. Tyntec went to the CommLaw Group, said, do you mind if we use your lawyer to sue you? And Mayor Brown somehow got them to okay it. And Tyntec thought this was a normal thing. When I found out in a hearing in Tampa, I lost my brains. I'm like, why are we not naming Carlisle in the suit? And the lawyer for Mayor Brown, DeSimone, his name was, gets up, screams out, runs out of the room. Runs out of the room. I can't, they're my client. And I looked at Tyntec, the Germans, I said, oh my God, I'm dead. Right at that point, you hire the other side's lawyers. You would think, and then, fast forward even later than that, once they got past the motion to dismiss, it's interesting story, you'll appreciate this, went and got litigation finance. Litigation finance came up with $3.5 million. They made him prepay Sussman Godfrey. So I went and brought in Sussman Godfrey, big firm, as you know, in New York City. And they made him prepay $3.5 million. First meeting with Sussman Godfrey, they go, oh, you're going to lose. I'm like, what do you mean we're going to lose? Well, Mayor Brown did this, this, and this. And I just kept looking at the German saying, unreal, because they got past the motion dismissed. And what happened is the Germans thought they were going to trial. And then the judge retired in Florida, unheard of, right? They brought in a magistrate from Georgia. Magistrate overturned it after Tyntec went and asked Cineverse for $100 million and the new agreements. So there went the third hub in the USA. Yeah. Although they still have a connection with Cinch, but things that just weren't said, things that weren't like, and you can't blame Tyntec for being naive on the U.S. legal system and just how corrupt some attorneys are.
Well, I'm not going to get into the business of maligning any fellow professional, but
no fellow professional. Just the concept of it's important here, and for our audience, if you guys want a real deal attorney, you want a real firm, I'm telling you, and Alan's telling you because he's with me. We've had over $500,000 viewers. We tell the truth on our show. A lot of people don't like us. We don't really care. At the end of the day, the truth of the matter is, there's one law firm, well, one attorney. I've met a couple of the other attorneys, but I'm sure they're under the same guidelines. You guys want honest help, whether it be from startup to compliance or anything in the U.S. or even internationally, you got to reach out to Marashlian because you're just not going to find it. You're just not going to find this type of experience and honesty. Honest lawyers, kind of like an oxymoron, but not with you.
I appreciate that, Johnny. Yeah, I mean, there is a place in our world for big firms, big law firms, solo practitioners, small firms, niche firms, boutique firms. Everybody plays their role, right? I think all consumers, even consumers of legal services, need to be informed. It's not necessary to have a big law firm doing everything for you, right? And at the same time, we know from our own experience, boutique firms are not going to be hired to, represent a company during an M&A or financing and going in and getting the big dollars. But of course, we help with the due diligence. We'll look under the hood and make sure you don't have any, if we're working.
Well, you were involved in a pretty big deal recently. I don't know if I'm allowed to tell. I mean, are we allowed to talk about some of the clients and deals that you're involved in? Or, I mean, I know you guys, your attorneys like to keep your mouth shut, but it's kind of like you can Google them.
If you can Google it, you can talk about it, and I
Well,
can
I mean,
refuse to talk about any details that I'm not at liberty to talk about.
oh,
But yeah,
okay. You know, I mean, you were involved in the Mint deal, which was humongous.
Yeah.
And that came through the prepaid, I guess your relationships in the prepaid press. I mean, our friend Robin Tobias runs the most successful show in the country. She started with the prepaid press, and now she went to all wireless. So did that relationship come from prepaid?
No, it didn't. It did, it came about several years prior to the acquisition. But it was a company that was looking for help with compliance. They were looking for somebody reliable, and we helped guide the company, and they've got really, really good people in house. So again, I will never take credit for credit that belongs to others. And really, the team at Mint Mobile was fantastic.
Yeah, you
They're
should have
very
got some stock. You should have did a stock deal on that one.
well,
$1.3 billion for
unfortunately, I don't have a personal relationship with Ryan Reynolds, so
yeah.
that wasn't on the table.
Uh,
But in
just
any
it.
event, that's just we didn't represent them in the deal. We certainly helped them make sure that when T-Mobile was kicking the tires and making sure they were buying an asset that didn't have
Which is
liabilities.
the most important part, which is due diligence. So what you did there, the audience needs to understand. Papering up a deal once you're past diligence, a monkey can do. But what you guys have done, getting him to that point to actually be able to ring the bell is
Yeah.
really the hard work.
If we're working on the sell side, we run into, it's either one or the other. It's either we're working and identifying, the issues that are going to create liabilities for a buyer, and working with the seller to help them massage the information and communicate that to the buyer in a way that doesn't throw too much sand into the gears of the M&A, the transaction. But again, we do it from both sides of the transaction. So when we're representing buyers,
No, I know. I
we are
just want the audience to understand what you're dealing with here and who we have on. You're very important. And now we're going to come to the part of the show where we got two things we're going to ask you. Number one, this TCPA suit on Twilio. Any teeth to that? What's your opinion from a legal perspective on actually the ruling of being able to go after a platform? Because that changes the game for the entire industry. Because as we know, I don't know if you saw my show with UMail, I had to explain to Alex Quilisi that he's got a $1 trillion database, which you understand. And maybe that'll be another question we'll ask you. Except there's such Boy Scouts that they don't even monetize it that way. But what is your thoughts on the TCPA suit with Twilio?
Well, we at one point in time represented a company called Stratix, and they ended up hiring Locke Lord, which did a fantastic job. They got a ruling out of a district court that, at least as far as the TCPA is concerned, or actually it was I think it was the telecommunications sales rule, the TSR, not the TCPA. So on the TSR, the judge handed down a ruling saying that they are just a platform. They are protected by Section 230 of the Communications Act. Section 230 is basically immunity for a platform, Facebook, for certain things. A platform company is not going to be liable for the things that their customer puts over their platform, as long as Section 230 of the Communications Act is what it is. Okay. And I have just recently read some rumblings that Congress is, there's some bipartisan support for some reforms to 230. because Section 230, some might argue, is partly responsible for this epidemic with children and depression and anxiety and
Correct.
ADHD and all sorts of horrible things because of there is no liability for the things that you allow other people to publish.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to take a position for or against. I think that there's.
But I think my specific question: do you see Twilio? Because I had a law firm that I knew went and spent $300,000 because they knew Twilio was spamming. The whole world knows they're spamming. Everybody knows they're the kings of spam. They created the whole spam epidemic and long history there. But obviously they always stood behind their customers, that type of thing. Do you think there's a potential issue with some of this new ruling stuff? Just an opinion. I mean, do you think there's any teeth or not? And we can move on.
To be quite honest, I don't know enough of the facts of what is happening to have an opinion. And I wouldn't state an opinion if I wasn't in the know. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll get the facts over to you.
But to paraphrase, if Section 230 changes, then yes. Would that be a fair paraphrase?
With respect to the TSR under Federal Trade Commission.
Okay.
TCPA, Stratix is still facing a bit of an uphill battle with TCPA claims.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an evolving area of the law.
Yes. Yeah.
CPaaS providers are being, the screws are being put to a lot of them.
Yes.
They're now being looked at by regulators, not just in the U.S. but globally.
Yes.
Well, they're mostly all global. You do know that, right? There's a few in the U.S. that are relevant, and the whole industry is worldwide because they're just SMS companies that say we're CPaaS now. The only really true CPaaS in the USA is Twilio, if you under that definition. But that's another conversation. But the international world, I mean, it's all Europe. It's all throughout the whole world. I mean, the SMS industry is not here. It's outside of here. And they've all come in here. I mean, look at the Cinch acquisition in the U.S. and they own a U.S. hub now from Verizon. Look at the deal that Infobit made, and then vice versa. You have Bandwidth making a deal for Voxbone. So you've got a lot. It's a global world. I mean, there's no question. It's which is a difficult time now because of the political landscape that we're living in. Those days are it's really difficult to transition. You have an open world and open trade, and now all of a sudden you can't do this here, you can't do that here, you embargo traffic here. Do you find yourself involved in any of those conversations regarding embargo traffic and stuff that's involved with the new world?
Data sovereignty, customer data sovereignty.
Not so much in the disputes. We do work with a bunch of companies that are multinationals that have operations. Again, when you're in the cloud, when you're doing over-the-top services, you can pretty much be anywhere. There are certain countries, obviously, that have tighter restrictions than others, but we live in a global digitized world. And it's becoming increasingly borderless in terms of the technology and its reach. But the laws are country by country, nation by nation, union by union. And I do not envy a global company operating in the digital economy unless you are the size of a Microsoft, unless you're the size of a Google, unless you're the size of an Apple. It takes tremendous resources to...
Which is why they're monopolies, basically, and which is why we're living in a monopoly world. A lot of these smaller companies can't compete.
Countrywide monopolies. I mean, we've had Unifonic on, and they create a moat by being compliant on a country-by-country basis within the Middle East. So
they also got to go to meetings at the palace over there, and they're allowed to do whatever they got to do. You can't compare what Unifonic does in 1 or 2 countries.
I agree, but I'm also going to reference Deutsche Telekom. And the reason they won virtual queue away from Twilio is because they were able to launch a programmable comms platform using SignalWire that was compliant with the German regulations, and it was a sovereign cloud that kept the customer data in Germany. Simple as that. So I understand what you're saying, Johnathan, from a general sense, but I see the tide turning to meeting local regulations because, there's less trust out there.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, and I've been doing this for over 25 years now, there are some things in terms of legal and regulatory compliance that cannot scale down to the size of many, many businesses.
Yeah.
Managing your company's risks is a full-time job. It's one thing to be aware of what laws may apply or do apply. That's step one. Step two is understand what is the potential liability, what is the exposure, what are the likelihood of the exposure becoming realized.
Yeah.
And then what's the business opportunity? What is the trade-off?
Yeah.
Are you trading off business opportunity, revenue generating opportunities to, address compliance matters? And that's a major aspect of our practice these days, and has been for the better part of the past decade.
Are you doing any work in the public markets? Are you doing any compliance work in the public markets? Because kind of the rules went out the window with the SEC. You could basically do whatever you want right now as a publicly traded company. I mean, Calera showed that. Gig Capital showed that with 6-packs. I mean, guys wiped out billions of dollars on companies that were like delis. And the SEC is really, really disgraceful. And are you dealing in that space? Because we talk about regulatory. All bets are off. If you're a company out there and you have revenues and you don't go public, you're a moron. Like Infobip's doing it now. Brilliant move. Because the rules have been lax. Years ago, I mean, remember like Martha Stewart getting arrested for something? I mean, it's just over. So the compliance, I think, is shifted. And, the big focus is on big tech and what they do because they monopolize everything. But it's the Wild West right now in the public markets. You could do whatever you want. I mean, you could put non-GAAP all over everything and people will still buy your stock. Non-GAAP means not real. Literally, that's what it means. So are you dealing any stuff in the public markets, or are you not going near that?
Just reflecting back on our earlier conversation, I'm quite comfortable navigating the Wild West territory. So I'll leave it at that.
So you've done prepaid, you've been there.
Nothing like prepaid. He's done it. He was the man. I mean, he was the guy that I can't even imagine how much money you're owed from people in the prepaid industry. I really can't imagine. You don't even know the characters. I mean, you can't even imagine. I tell people, Johnathan, unless you were there, you'd never believe it.
Yeah. I'll put it this way. I was gifted a couple of bottles of wine by a client that never paid a $250,000 bill. So I always like to say that those were the 2 most expensive bottles of wine I've ever consumed.
Yeah, I probably know who that guy is.
So Johnny, you said you had a few more questions. Just trying to keep to time.
I have some. I'm trying to be easy because I have so much respect for Johnathan, and it's a difficult conversation. This is difficult for me because normally I like to go at anybody. But I revere him so much and respect him so much. You earn respect with me based on what kind of person you are. I know his integrity. And, I just want our audience to know, guys, the most important person in your life. And if you have the opportunity, because he's a small shop, you have the opportunity and you're doing some important stuff. And Johnathan has some bandwidth for you. It's your number one guy. And I have 2 more questions. Employment lawyer. Are you doing any employment law anywhere?
We dabble in it. I would not say that it's an area that we have a deep bench.
That's the most corrupt thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like that.
We have a number of clients that you could say that we're outside general counsel to them. So any of the business issues that arise, corporate issues, HR. Again, I like I said, I would not say that we are specialists, but we know how to serve small, medium, even medium, large businesses. And we're a place that those companies can come and understand that, we'll deliver on the specialized knowledge, the things that, I don't wish on my worst enemy the legal pathway of becoming a communications telecom lawyer. You cannot learn the things that we have to know in school. You're not going to learn them in 5 years on the job. If you haven't lived through the transformation of the technology and seen how the laws and the politics and the policies and all the different factors that have to come into any decision making that you assist a client with, it is a tremendous challenge.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm either blessed, my partners and I are we're either blessed or we're cursed with having been doing this for as long as we have.
I think you're blessed, Space, because you've helped a lot of people. You're definitely blessed, because you know what, you guys are at the top of what you do, and you're a niche, and your credibility is all over the place. So I know who your clients are. I know you from years ago. So, I wanted to hit you hard on a couple of other things on robocall mitigation, spam, and that type of stuff. But I kind of don't want you cursing at me.
No.
Because as you know, our beliefs is there's a solution, and they don't want to solve it. Because you can't tell me you can go to Mars and you can't stop robocalling and texting spam. Our motto is it's just too much of the whole ecosystem is just making too much money. Just like AIT International, they're making too much money. The M&Os. Me and Alan have this fight all the time. He thinks, it takes two to tango. I said, no. If you want to work with that M&O, you're going to give him what he wants. And so it's just sad because AI. I think the next question, AI. With what I see that's going to happen, and obviously I know one of your clients, and you're privy to a lot of stuff that's coming out with AI, deepfakes, fake voice, kidnappings, people recording people's calls and ransom and fraud. I mean, do you ever see a time where they'll actually try to solve it?
AI?
No, solve the simple fact of identity, which they don't want, because right now you can vote without identity. Doesn't really matter. So that's a whole other conversation. So how are you going to actually employ identity when you don't even need it to vote in this country? So that's the first question, why it'll never get solved. It goes down to pure identity, knowing who somebody is.
I think solution might be the wrong goal, right? Total eradication. We are trained as lawyers not to live in a universe of absolutes. So I'm very comfortable with progress. And I think there's progress being made. And I think that more progress can be made.
I vehemently disagree with you. I vehemently disagree with you. There is no progress. The spam is targeted. 78 billion spam texts, and you even look at Alex's numbers. It's all targeted. People are losing billions of dollars and not even reporting it. There is no progress being made. All these patchwork jobs, are great. They're helping some people, but it's we've had a company with a solution out here, and nobody understands them or is really talking to them. Some companies are. I just asked you a question. If you think, I think what's going to happen here, it's going to get so bad with AI and stuff are going to start happening to politicians. And once that happens, then the carriers are going to get heat because you start finding them, tens of millions. You watch how fast they find a way to stop it.
Well, we do not represent Lingo Telecom, but I use that as an example of the risk that carriers, service providers have, especially voice over IP companies.
And you don't think they knew what was going on at Lingo?
I can't comment on that. I just don't know, right? And if I did, I'm certain I certainly would not disclose that on a podcast. My perception of that situation, again, we're talking about the Biden deep fake New Hampshire robocall campaign.
We're talking it's going to get much worse. That wasn't that bad. I mean, it's bad, but it's like you got people like are recording kids' voices and calling up parents for kidnapping.
Yeah.
That's bad.
But, again, what gets attention is when you do it to a politician.
Yeah,
especially the president of the United States. Okay. And so the laws on AI are just, they're being conceived now. They're not even being written. Sure, there are some states, you've got the EU's AI Act, you've got, OMB policy, you've got the Biden executive order, Colorado, Utah. You got a few states that are doing some things, but, the laws are just now being conceived.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a generational transformation. Again, not just in how it impacts society, jobs, professions, politics, just about everything. It's also going to make some seismic shifts in the law, right? And it takes time for those things to happen. It's going to be messy and ugly. And it's an area of you can't avoid it, but going into it, I'll go back to what I said earlier: risk management. You have to adopt these things into your company's practices, into your policies, practices, employment. How you hire people. How you monitor performance, all sorts of things are going to be impacted by AI. And again, we're talking about generative AI. And so we're very, very greenfield when it comes to what are the guardrails going to be? What are the parameters that businesses and consumers simply cannot cross without knowing that they're going to be hit with some painful penalties?
Penalties are worthless. But right now you have a robocall and phishing and spam text epidemic, and now you're going to unleash AI on it, and vulnerable are going to get hurt. Good people are getting hurt. Families are getting hurt, and that's what we care about at TADSummit. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're looking at it from a more global viewpoint as an attorney, but from our standpoint, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's just disgraceful. That they don't solve these problems. No difference. And I think it's disgraceful that, Google and Meta are lobbying, spent $1 million each in New York to lobby
against child protection.
Against protecting kids.
Yeah, you might have good company in that viewpoint of Gen AI and ChatGPT with the one and only Scarlett Johansson.
Yes.
Yeah. But honestly, her, and I'll argue there too. For her, it's about, you took my voice. Well, we don't really care about them taking your voice. Stop crying about it taking your voice. Why aren't you crying about how it's being used to hurt people and mimic other people's voices to hurt them on a family matter? So everything is about me. Her too.
But it
really.
shows
so
that
she could use her voice to talk about how much fraud you could do on people. I mean, some guy just took him 15 minutes. He went and extorted $250 out of somebody by mimicking his daughter's voice.
Yeah, but
as a father, that's terrifying. And
Johnny, it shows with OpenAI how they do business. It shows the type of people. They'd had several discussions with Scarlett.
They're businessmen. They're here to make money. That's it.
She said, and they basically did it anyway. Okay?
Yeah.
That's not business.
But she's crying about her being violated with her voice.
Because she's not crying about a business discussion, and she's no. And
she's not crying about what it can do to somebody, or how it can hurt somebody.
I agree, but it shows their intent.
Yeah, I get Johnny's point, right? And nobody is in favor of using technology, old, new, not even existing yet.
Yeah.
For bad purposes, but we live in a world where there are bad people.
Yeah.
And we can be Pollyannish and think that
When the
there's
bad
ways-
people are the aggregators and the CPaaS companies and the hubs that are allowing this to go through, you're wrong. Okay, you're wrong. They're making money off it. They
Yes.
all know they're making money off it. They're making money
Johnny.
off people getting harmed. They're wrong.
Johnny, we have a thing called the dark web. It's an entire ecosystem of opaqueness, of concealing. And I don't think a lot of good is going on in the dark web, but it exists. We know it exists.
But the simple fact that I should know who's calling me and who's texting me or who's calling and texting my daughter is in the simplistic form. You talk about the dark web, go talk to the NSA. But it should be our right to know who's calling you, who's texting you, and who's calling and texting the most vulnerable in your life.
Yeah.
So that to me is unconscionable, and that's what we've been screaming about. The campaign registry is set up not to work. The whole robocalling scam, they're all making so much money off mitigation and scam likely and all this stuff. It's nonsensical. This all can be stopped, but they don't want to because they're making too much money. Carriers are making $4.99 every month on filtering. They're making now $20 billion a year on spam text. And the whole ecosystem is making it. So, look, I don't want to get heated on this because I know how you feel. I know how you feel off the record, Jonathan. So I'll take it easy.
Do you want to wrap up with one question? Do you want to wrap up with one question, Johnny? Because we're way over.
Go ahead. You ask a question. I'm hogging.
Okay,
He'll come back.
No. So, and I know from LinkedIn that you follow this, but I'm just interested in your view around the work of Eric Troutman and Pooja Amin, because I love the work that they do. We support Pooja. She's published lots of stuff. I'm just interested on your view on that law firm.
I will not publicly state a view on any other attorney or law firm in my profession, other than to say that I admire a couple of things I admire greatly. Mm-hmm. First, he is adamantly, not a big law attorney, which is fantastic, right? We need that. I consider us that. Yeah. But big law has its place. Yeah. It may not be the place for everyone, for everything. It's always good to have a balance, to understand that there are different ways of addressing problems. Yeah. And they don't all have to bankrupt their clients. Yes. So, kudos. The other thing is sharing your knowledge with the public, with competitors, with businesses that are not your clients. Again, very much aligned in making information available. Yeah. Where I may have some questions here and there, differences, we'll leave that between these two ears.
Style.
Yeah, I think Alan wants to know whether or not you thought Pooja was lying, because we're like the only people like Meth and these different groups think like it was all made up. I'm like, craziest thing ever. And when we're tired of it, I'm tired of hearing it was staged, because I know what happened to her because of us and because of Rick Choi's letter. So that's what kind of Alan was trying to get to, but you don't need to answer that, Jonathan. And look, for everybody out there who's listening to us and all these companies, nobody more important in your life than the right attorney. And if you have the right attorney and you can actually get his time, it won't cost you what big law costs you, and it'll save you more than you'll ever know.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much, Jonathan, for an excellent discussion.